For ages, there has been one question debated by Fire Emblem historians. Is Ike kinda fruity? As one of the most popular lords in a franchise whose fandom loves shipping, the question of whether Ike is into men, women, both, or neither gets brought up fairly frequently. And there are arguments for all sides of the equation. So I thought, in honor of Pride Month, I would do a video investigating the case for and against a gay Ike in Fire Emblem, Path of Radiance, and Radiant Dawn. And hey, if you like this sort of content, I have a bunch of other videos talking about Fire Emblem from an explicitly queer perspective, gathered together in a playlist down below. So be sure to check them out when you're done with this one, and subscribe to stay up to date with all of my Fire Emblem videos. Alright, shameless plug out of the way, let's talk about Ike. Before looking at Ike in his own games, I want to talk about one of the more contentious aspects of the whole Ike sexuality debate, and that is the character Priam from Fire Emblem Awakening. Priam shows up with the sword Ragnell, which is Ike's iconic personal weapon from both of his games. And he claims to be a descendant of the Radiant Hero, which is a title Ike is sometimes referred to as. This claim is sometimes debated, however, because instead of having Ike's iconic Ether skill, Priam has Soul and Luna, which do similar things to Ether, but not quite the same. And Ether is actually a skill in Awakening, so this isn't a system limitation, it was a conscious choice by the developers. Additionally, there's apparently some Heroes dialogue that suggests he might not actually be related to Ike, but I haven't played Fire Emblem Heroes, so I can't comment as to just how credible the dialogue is. I will say, however, for our purposes, I don't think it actually matters whether or not Priam is a fraud, because Ike could be gay or straight regardless. Even putting aside the possibility of a transgender Soren or Renolf, Priam could very easily be related to Ike without Ike ever impregnating anyone, and that's because Mist exists. Mist is Ike's little sister, and we know for a fact that she is into men because she has a paired ending with Boyd. Therefore, it's distinctly possible that Priam is entirely telling the truth, and yet Ike is just his great-great-uncle instead of great-great-grandfather. After all, Priam is pretty vague about the specifics of his ancestry. So this video really isn't going to be an investigation as to whether Priam is a swindler, or if he was created by the devs to stomp out the gay Ike theories, or any other nonsense like that. As far as I'm concerned, Priam was just supposed to be a reference to Path of Radiance, one of the more popular Fire Emblem games, in Awakening, a game full of references to past Fire Emblem games. Instead, I think it's more productive to look at the actions of Ike himself in both Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn, because there's a decent amount we can intuit from it. And starting in Path of Radiance, there's a decent amount of evidence both for and against gay Ike. Starting with the case 4, that's almost entirely encapsulated by Soren. Soren has known Ike since childhood, and despite the fact that he's usually a very closed-off person, Soren is clearly close to the blue-haired lord. In fact, I don't think it would be inaccurate to say that Soren is basically completely devoted to Ike, which is particularly noteworthy since Soren tends to be standoffish and thorny towards others, even others he has a decent relationship with, such as the other Grail mercenaries. In large part because of his traumatic history, Soren just always has his guard up, but he lets it down around Ike. And in return, Ike seems to feel safe around Soren. In fact, he often seeks him out for advice. In part thanks to Soren's tactical acumen, but in part because Ike just sees Soren as someone he's very close to. In fact, I think it would be hard to argue that these two don't love each other in some way. The question is instead whether this is a romantic love or a brotherly one. And it's because of this that Ike x Soren is one of the more popular ships in the Fire Emblem fandom. In fact, it's so popular that it was kind of acknowledged indirectly in Fire Emblem Engage when the DLC added Emblem Soren and he gets powered up next to Emblem Ike. So, with Ike's closest canonical relationship being with another man, you can see why so many people consider Ike to be the first canonical gay lord, but it's worth noting that Soren isn't the only potential partner for Ike presented to us in Path of Radiance. And no, I'm not talking about Ranulf. The furry will have his time, but in Path of Radiance, he's largely a side character who mostly exists to explain how the Laguz society works to Ike, and by extension the player. No, instead I'm referring to Elincia, the game's other protagonist. Elincia's story starts with the murder of her entire family and most of her royal guard. Finding herself completely alone and hunted by Dane soldiers, she encounters the Grail mercenaries, and they take her in. In theory, as a client, but in practice, it's more of a favor. Elincia can't rightly pay them. And even once she gets the money, her relationship with the Grail mercenaries is much more than that of an employer-employee. It's clear that she really cares about them, especially Ike, who eventually she even gives a lordship, and is constantly referring to as my Lord Ike even before that. I think in the same way that Ike and Soren definitely love each other, I would argue Elincia loves the Grail mercenaries. She sees them as the new family after her old one got killed. The only question is her love for Ike this same way, or is it romantic? And I would argue that in parts of Path of Radiance, the visual language indicates these two as a potential couple. In fact, the closing cutscene has both of them greeting the kingdom together. It's a very heteronormative the hero gets the princess ending, and very much flies in the face of the Ike gay theory. At least until we get to the sequel Radiant Dawn. Because here, Ike has renounced his lordship in order to go back to being one of the Grail mercenaries, and Elincia is alone at court without him. Well, not exactly alone, she's surrounded by other allies, like Lucia and Joffrey. And in fact, Joffrey is one of the potential romantic pairings for her in Radiant Dawn. You see, unlike Path of Radiance, Radiant Dawn has paired endings. And some of these endings are explicitly romantic, such as Elincia and Joffrey, or Mist and Boyd. However, Elincia does not have an explicit romantic paired ending with Ike. In fact, she doesn't get a paired ending with Ike at all. But Ike does get two paired endings. One with Soren and one with Ranulf. And while these are not explicitly romantic, they are read to be by many within the community. Especially because, while Fire Emblem on the GBA had a few non-romantic paired endings, Radiant Dawn doesn't. Thanks to Radiant Dawn's limited support system, every single other paired ending is explicitly romantic, with the possible exception of Lucia and Bastion, since they are stated to have never gotten married, although it says they continued their affair, which I would read as romantic. And in the case of Ike, he runs away on a journey forever with either Soren or Ranulf, depending on how the supports go. Which similarly doesn't need to be read as romantic, but definitely works in that vein. And considering Ike's only paired endings both involve him running away with another man, I think it's pretty hard to read this as anything other than romantic. In the past, I've subscribed to the theory that Ike is asexual or aromantic, mostly because I like the idea of relationships where love is not explicitly romantic, and him and Soren felt like it fit the bill. But on closer examination for making this video, I find it impossible to deny that Ike is just the first gay lord in Fire Emblem. And that's pretty cool for him. That's kind of all I've got for today, so happy Pride Month, and it's time to thank my patrons. Thank you to Logs, Glup Shido, Erica Ford, Perg Knight, YLO1, George Grenville, the 7th PM, Jamie Collins, Arvis, Floahay, Amy Hazel, Hungry Hearts, Hound Dogs, Burnt to Cinders, Crimson Claw, Fork King, Sarah, Ziggy WSB, Derek, Shinthia, Faulty Videos, Kyle Madison, Derek Williams, Anna Cabana, The Daily Fugle, Faye, Magic Bite, Thoughtful Insanity, Robin Goodfeller, JT Spritter, Laura Hunter, Jonathan Durbin, Dicyke, Chris, Root Beer Piance, Queen Eliza, Control Alt Aegis, Roman Cormancic, Knick-Knack Hammersmack, Carrier Has Left, Angel Napcaceres, Zanwiff, Not Gino, Name Number 5, Squid Stats, Big Fan of Bishop Clement, Derek, Flingon, Edward C., Cabbage, Caius Cole, Bree, Punch Thunder Champion, Eggman, Maxine the Vampire Queen, Sardonic Muse, Wesley Toma, Sensitive Luigi, Rage, Dr. Frying Pan, Toon, Turzy P, Femtal Illness, Wannabe Cinnabon, Punk Tattoo Guy, Key the Iron Idol, Jackson McMahon, Saren Gurlixy, Rezi, Dino Anna, Alex Erie, Andu, Ria, Gameboo, Carosa, Firant, Your Doctor, Frozen Helm, KH, Girl Boss, Lizard Bongwater, Christopher Bueno, Marin McLean, Jaden Dylan Solis, Some Trades, Alice, Smaz Ruby, Robin D, LNB, They Thom, Klon, Willow, Gabe the Green, Guiji555, and especially my Jagans, Himeroan, Dragonback Lancer, Siggy, Autumn, and Meritus Bacon. If you would like to support the channel, getting early access to videos, getting to vote on what videos I make, and all sorts of other cool benefits, then there is a link to my Patreon down below. But please, only donate if you can comfortably afford to do so. I don't want anyone going broke over Fire Emblem, even if it does have gay Ike, which is awesome. Regardless of what you choose to do though, I hope you have a wonderful day. Stay safe, gamers.